So you can imagine we made our dream move to Colorado in July 2015, and it really was a very exciting time for our family. I've worked in the beer business with Molson Coors for, at that point, 17 years. And to be asked to move over to Colorado and sort of take on a global role was amazing. But I've got to be honest, the excitement of moving to one of the most wonderful landscapes in the world was really very attractive as well. So as a landscape photographer, it was just great. Children settled very quickly. My wife loves it here, and we really thought we'd made it. And then 1 year later, we had the awful news that I had stage 4 colon cancer, having discovered a few blood spots where you don't want them, had a colonoscopy, and that was the diagnosis. So it really does change everything in terms of your outlook. And obviously for that moment you feel like life has stopped. Of course the reality is life hasn't stopped. One of the things I've tried to develop through this is a really positive mindset, and that once you have had that diagnosis, the healing can begin. And I know it sounds... if there can be such a sort of slightly idealistic view of a diagnosis, that's the worst you'll feel. And after that, if an oncologist says to you, we can treat this, then you have to go with that. You have to be positive. And that's very much the attitude that we took. I've got to be honest, photography wasn't the first thing in my mind when I was told. Obviously, you know, life and family are very much the things that you want around you at that point. But of course, once my treatment began, I was coping with treatment, I was responding well, and my mind went to photography. And you know, it really is part of who I am. It's my creative outlook, and it's something I wanted to pursue. And I knew, I was undergoing 40 weeks of chemotherapy. At that point, we didn't know how long, but we knew it would be a lengthy period. And photography, as I say, is just one of the underpinnings of who I am. It keeps me going, and it's very crucial to my mindset as a creative person. So we had the double blow when the oncologist basically said there's a drug you're on called panitumumab, and it basically makes you very, very photosensitive. So I just urge you to avoid sunlight. So it was like I'd been punched twice. So the red face I've got now is still a sort of mild after effects of that drug. And if I go out in the sun, I have to cover my face completely. And clearly that was an impediment to a landscape photographer. And that's when I hit on this idea of shooting from the shade of my car. And it was basically Colorado state parks to the rescue. I mean, the wildlife that you have here in abundance in these parks, which are car accessible, was an absolute key, I think, to my mindset and a successful journey. I will never, ever take away from the medical brilliance that exists in Colorado. It's absolutely fantastic. But I do believe that your mindset can contribute 1%. And I believe that photography was one of the keys, alongside family and support and friendship, that really drove that mindset for me. I think there's probably a couple of things. I mean, for me, a lot of this is very new. So people in Colorado look at bison and say, well, we see a lot of bison. You might even look at hummingbirds in spring or summer and say, we see a lot of hummingbirds. To me, these were exotic animals. These were brand new, and they were on my doorstep. The idea that I could shoot hummingbirds, you know, daily was just an absolute fantasy to me. They don't exist in Europe at all. I mean, this is an American species, if you like. So to have access to that kind of wildlife was fantastic. And then just the accessibility of the Rocky Mountain Arsenal, 15 miles from my house, Cherry Creek State Park, not even a mile from my house. I'm able to, you know, have an oncology treatment and then come home and just go out and let off steam by relaxing in the park with your camera and just go into your own thoughts. Was very, very important to my mindset. So that I would just credit the state for really helping uplift me through a tough time. Yeah, no, you're right. Wildlife is very much a different genre to landscape altogether. I had been part of the club environment in the UK where you're entering competitions and one of them might be wildlife. So I had dabbled before. I'd shot puffins in flight and that kind of thing in the UK, but never to a serious degree. And the kit is the first thing. So my lens of choice through landscape was a wide-angle 14 to 24mm lens. That would be absolutely hopeless shooting something, especially a hummingbird. So the first thing I did is acquire a decent kit. I also shoot a lot of sports photography, so the lens of choice for me was the 400mm Nikon f2.8, which is just a fantastically versatile an incredibly high quality lens. And then shooting from the car, you've got to be robust. You're not using a tripod all the time, so having a big sort of meaty sandbag on the side of the door just gives you that stability to shoot through the window and get stable shots. You're shooting at distance, so suddenly fractions of movement, the vibration is absolutely something you've got to eliminate. I'm well, like many wildlife photographers, very, very fussy, and you've got to have crisp, incredibly sharp shots. So the right lens, the right kit, the right stability was absolutely crucial there. I think I've probably had 2 or 3 what you might call breakthrough moments in my career. I was a member of a club in England. I did well. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot. But I think the breakthrough was getting into the final of the Landscape Photographer of the Year there. And I think I broke through partly by doing something a little bit different, a little bit unique. I, like many of us, had kit from different kind of genre, if you like. I had filters from my seascapes and landscapes. I had flash photography from portraiture work. And I'd never put them together. And I actually thought, well, what would happen if you were to shoot flash with a graduated filter? And I actually developed a range of flower shots called dramatic flowerscapes, which broke through for me and got me into the Landscape Photography of the Year final. And then I'd quite a good run of three or four years in the UK and the Scottish Landscape Photography of the Year. They produce a wonderful publication every year. So we've got 4 sort of coffee table books in the lounge, if you like. And then just last year, they brought out a 10th anniversary edition and had selected one of my photos to feature in what they've described as the best of the best. So that was personally very fulfilling. I think another breakthrough moment, it wasn't an accolade as such, but being in Denver, trying to sort of break into the sort of photographer community here, there was a couple of things happen. One, I had applied to become part of the Denver Photo Art Gallery not long after I moved here. And I was absolutely privileged when they said, look, send us in some of your work, we'll take a look. And then in 2016, late 2016, I was invited to start showing my work there. And it was not long after I'd begun chemotherapy. So again, as another kind of antidote to what you might call the depression of chemotherapy, I had this wonderful filling experience every first Friday of the month where I'd go along to the gallery and meet people that were appreciating my work. So although I wasn't shooting as avidly as I had been before, I was able to almost live vicariously through the stories of the landscapes that I'd shot, and managed to sell a few as well. Not long after that, there was an amazing scene in Denver where I woke up one morning to sort of rolling mist coming through the city. And I just got in my car and drove as fast as I could to my office, which sits 48 floors high at downtown Denver. So got up there quickly as I could, just as this mist was rising through the city to an absolutely spectacular sunset. And because that was such a unique scene, if you like, 303 magazine became very interested. They did a feature on a number of photographers that had been lucky enough to capture that weather phenomenon, and ran a couple of pages of my photos just of that one scene, which was great. I think if I was to pick one more accolade, it was we had some tremendous publicity in the media around the book Through the Window after I'd launched that after my cancer-free diagnosis. But the one that really stood out for me as a photographer was getting front cover of the Colorado Colorado Outdoors magazine. They have a photography edition once a year. So to actually get the front cover of that was personally very fulfilling, and just a nice cap on what had been quite a very new and exciting photographic journey for me to end the year that way was great. I am a confirmed landscape and wildlife photographer, so I was very clearly landscape before. I spent a year really just doing wildlife, and now I would absolutely say I'm committed to both. We've just come back from a wonderful tour of New Mexico. The white sands down there are absolutely spectacular, and if I had lost any landscape passion, it all came back in that place. So to be out in the white sands in the middle of the night shooting the Milky Way was just as fulfilling as snapping a hummingbird at 1/5000th of a second. So I'm absolutely committed to both.